Sharing your day with us. President Trump and Speaker Pelosi strike a deal on spending and raising the debt limit. There are complaints, though, on the left and on the right. The challenge now, getting it through Congress. Plus, Joe Biden unveils a new criminal justice reform plan. It embraces new progressive ideas about reducing mass incarceration, and it walks away from many ideas Biden championed as a senator back in the 1990s. And call it a warm-up for Bob Mueller. The special counsel testifies tomorrow about Russian meddling in the 2016 campaign and about the president's efforts to stymie his investigation. Today, the FBI director says, problem not solved.
Are the Russians still trying to interfere in our election system?
The Russians are absolutely intent on trying to interfere with our elections through,
Is it fair to say that
foreign influence.
Everything we've done against Russia has not deterred them enough? All the sanctions, all the talk, they're still at it.
Well, my view is until they stop, they haven't been deterred enough.
And they're still doing it.
Yes.
And we begin the hour on that subject with the big wait for tomorrow morning and the Russia special counsel's Capitol Hill testimony. Today, Democrats are doing a dry run, holding mock hearings. Last night, the president quoting a Fox Business personality to hammer home his own Mueller report conclusion. Quote, there's no there there. That's the president's take. Today, the House Democratic Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler says that's a lie. And that tomorrow's hearing, Nadler says, will break through the president's spin. Robert Mueller is a tough witness. He's testified before Congress dozens of times in the past 3 decades. And the former special counsel cautioned, remember, in his own public appearance since the end of his investigation, quote, my report is my testimony. But let's take a look at some of the big questions Democrats will want to ask Mueller, even if Mueller doesn't want to answer. Start with Volume 1. That's the part of the report that's about Russia meddling. Some of the issues Democrats think will come up at the hearing. Did the president, people inside his campaign, or any associates of the Trump campaign or the president have any knowledge that WikiLeaks would release hacked emails? Did they know that in advance? That's one area. Why did you not interview Donald Trump Jr. about that infamous June 2016 meetings with Russians at Trump Tower? You can be certain this issue will come up. From Volume 2, this is about the alleged obstruction by the president, or at least acts special counsel said could be construed as obstruction. Did you intend for your report to serve as an impeachment referral? The House Democratic math, especially on the impeachment question, could be affected by how the special counsel answers that. Why did you say in the report that you don't exonerate the president if you decided not to charge him with obstructing justice? Democrats will try to get in there into the Justice Department guidelines. Can't indict a sitting president. But what does Mueller think about the president? We'll see if he answers the question. There's also a lot of interesting things in the appendix of the report where Mueller details sort of how the investigation played out. Why did he decide not to have a subpoena fight when the president said he would not voluntarily sit down for an in-person interview? Why not try a subpoena? See if Mueller will answer that. And remember, the president did submit written answers to some questions. Does the evidence suggest he was fully candid in those written answers to the special counsel office? That will be another area for the special counsel. Republicans will try to attack the credibility of the administration. Democrats are hoping, even if Mueller doesn't go outside of the report, just hearing him read himself the key findings will be powerful.
Would anyone else have faced criminal prosecution?
I don't think we'll ask it in that form because I don't think he'd answer it in that form.
What if Robert Mueller says, I refer you to my report?
He may very well. And then we'll have to, we will be referring to specific pages and specific sections in the report and asking him to comment on them.
How's that going to sound? What's the question that you're going to ask him?
Well, paragraph 2 on page whatever says the following. Is that correct? Did you find that? Does this describe obstruction of justice?
With me in studio to share their reporting and their insights, CNN's Sarah Murray, Michael Scher with the New York Times, Tolu Olorunipo with the Washington Post, Melanie Zanona with Politico. Depending on who you ask, this is either going to be the world's biggest event, the Mueller movie, or a dud because there's nothing new. What are we expecting? Or do we know what to expect?
You know, I think it could be somewhere in between there. The reality is we have not heard Bob Mueller say all that much, so it's still going to be interesting to hear the words coming out of his mouth. You know, all we have heard from him throughout this entire process is a 10-minute statement. But I think that it was very clear from what Robert Mueller said in that 10-minute statement and from the letter from the Justice Department yesterday that he is going to cover what is in that report. He is not going to show up and drop a bunch of new bombshells and answer a lot of questions that have so far gone unanswered. So I think that that it could be a source of frustration, certainly for people who are watching from home, as well as members from that committee. But I think they're doing what they have to do. You can't have someone run an investigation like this and then not bring them before Congress and at least ask the question.
Absolutely. And to that point, when people say, why are they even doing this? He spent tens of millions of dollars of the American people's money on a very important investigation. This is a democracy. Of course, he should go before the Congress and have oversight. You mentioned the Justice Department letter. I'll call that a brushback pitch, if you will. Bob Mueller was the FBI director for more than a decade. He was a federal prosecutor for decades before that. He knows the rules and he knows the systems. But the Department of Justice sends him a letter saying you must remain within the boundaries of your public report because matters within the scope of your investigation were covered by executive privilege. There's actually other legal precedent where Bob Mueller can say whatever Bob Mueller wants as long as he's talking about his investigation. But why? Why a brushback pitch from the Trump Justice Department?
And if you remember, Attorney General Barr did not abide by those rulings when he decided to testify. He talked about all kinds of issues outside of the report. He explained his decision and why he decided that the president was not guilty of obstruction of justice. So he's applying different rules for Bob Mueller. But this has been the strategy of the Trump administration to try to limit the amount of people coming up to testify about the Mueller report, limit the amount of information that can be shown on television about the Mueller report, limit the amount of testimony that can be put forward about what's in the Mueller report, because the Mueller report is damning for the Trump administration. Even though he says no obstruction, no collusion, it is not a positive picture of what's happening within the White House.
That's what he says. That's not what the report says.
Right. I also would point out Democrats are leaving nothing to chance. They really want to sell the testimony. They know that it's probably not just enough to have him out there saying these things. So they're actually launching a war room where they're going to be actively clipping and blasting out testimony excerpts. They're using a hashtag retweet the report to try to amplify his testimony. And they're doing these mock sessions today, which I think just really underscores how high stakes these hearings are.
And the Judiciary Committee will deal with the obstruction issue. The Intelligence Committee, it's two separate types, they will deal with the Volume 1, which is the Russia meddling, which includes the Trump Tower meeting and Donald Trump Jr.'s playing footsie, I would say, with WikiLeaks through that. And we'll see how that plays out. The president says, maybe I'll watch.
No, I'm not going to be watching. Probably, maybe I'll see a little bit of it. I'm not going to be watching Mueller because you can't take all those bites out of the apple.
Is there anybody alive who believes the president will not be watching Mueller?
No. One of the things to me is that there's a lot of attention focused on the Democrats and the Democrats' questioning of Mueller. I actually think that I'm going to be interested in watching the way Mueller responds to what we expect will be attacks from the Republican side, right? I mean, the president has spent all of this time, and his allies on Capitol Hill have spent all of this time, focused on, castigating Bob Mueller and his team, the 18 angry Democrats, all of the attacks to try to undermine his credibility. This will be Bob Mueller's first opportunity to respond to that, and it's likely that a guy like that who is so sort of proud of his reputation is going to want to respond, or at least if he doesn't want to respond, he may have no choice in the face of what we expect to be some of these attacks. And so I think it's going to be interesting to watch how does that work, and what kind of moments does that produce?
I think that's a great point. And if you go back through history, we'll see what happens tomorrow. If you go back through history and the Republicans sort of bragging, House Republicans especially, House Democrats too have performance issues, but House Republicans bragging, say the Benghazi hearing, other things like that, they do not have a great track record of delivering.
Right. The irony of all the people who continued to hold Benghazi hearings and talk about Hillary Clinton's emails until now, saying, we don't really need Bob Mueller to testify, should not be lost on anyone at home who is watching this play out tomorrow, the sort of final chapter of this Russia investigation.
And to that point, Senator Lindsey Graham, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee on the Senate side, he wants to bring in George Papadopoulos because he wants to explore the origins of the investigation. George Papadopoulos, who the president himself calls the coffee boy, we don't know, okay, Senator Lindsey Graham. He says, Bob Mueller, why would we want to talk to him?
It won't reshape my dynamic. I've heard all I need to hear from Mueller. I've read his report. I accept the findings. I don't think it's going to change public opinion. Having been involved in the Clinton impeachment, if the public's not with you, you'll pay a price. And I don't think anything Mueller can say that's going to change anybody's mind.
I don't think we know that about public opinion. I think that is the big open question. Do the American people watch? Do the American people then watch the news coverage? Do the American people get interested and go looking for those clips if they see them, out in social media? We don't know the answer to that, but it seems pretty clear that Republicans are not going to change their mind. So the question I have is, will more House Democrats, will Mueller make a case that we're at 88 now on the record saying we should impeach? Will more House Democrats say impeach, and will that complicate, even though Nancy Pelosi wants him to testify, will in the end it complicate her job?
And I think Democrats have to be careful what they wish for here, because across the board, Democrats want to damage his election prospects. They want these spicy clips to come out, and they want to show his alleged obstruction in this probe. But at the same time, that could very well lead to a swell of Democrats coming out in support of impeachment. And that puts Nancy Pelosi in a very serious bind as she's trying to protect those moderates heading into 2020.
Yeah, Mueller spoke for only 10 minutes a couple of months ago, and we did see sort of a dam break with several Democrats come out and say, you know, we are now in favor of impeachment. Now he's going to be on the Hill for several hours, and he's going to have an opportunity to talk more about what was in his report and answer tough questions. And that could lead to even more Democrats breaking ranks and saying, yes, we do support impeachment.
Be a fascinating day. We'll see how it plays out. Be sure to tune in tomorrow morning. Get up bright and early with us. Special Counsel Robert Mueller testifying before Congress live. The Mueller hearing coverage begins 8 a.m. Eastern, right here on CNN. Up next for us, a sweeping new budget deal raises immediate alarm bells for conservatives and Democrats. Congressional leaders and the White House urging lawmakers to get on board today. That after the two sides finally agreed to a sweeping budget and debt ceiling deal last night. President Trump signaling he's on board, at least for now, tweeting, "I'm pleased to announce that a deal has been struck on a 2-year budget and debt ceiling with no poison pills." The president went on to say this was a real compromise in order to give another big victory to our great military and vets. This is far from over, however. Significant incoming opposition from members of both parties. We're seeing it already today. Plenty for both sides in this deal to dislike. It does propose $1.3 trillion in total spending for each of the next 2 years. It also raises the spending limits by about $320 billion over those 2 years. The deal suspends the debt ceiling until well after the 2020 election, and it says goodbye to the sequester, the budget caps enacted back in 2011. CNN's Phil Mattingly is counting the votes live up on Capitol Hill. Phil, walk us through some of the landmines and the path ahead here.
Yeah. So here's the landmines right now. If you are a fiscal conservative, you have major problems with this deal. And we've already heard that from several conservatives. You've had a lot of Republicans who are cool to the idea of the major increase in spending, both defense and domestic, as well as the fact that it essentially does away with one of the key fiscal victories the Republicans claimed from the Obama years. It gets rid of the budget caps entirely after years of delaying those caps. If you are a Democrat, you have issues with two things. The idea that there are limitations on policy riders, basically adding things that are priorities for your party in spending bills coming up in September. And also, there are no limitations on the transfer authority for the administration to move money around to potentially finance a border wall. So that's where the two polls are going to be, and that's where you're going to see lawmakers drop off and vote against. The coalition to get this passed is the same one it always is on agreements like this. You have defense hawks from the Senate Armed Services Committee, the House Armed Services Committee, from both parties who will join. You have appropriators who like the fact that this deal smooths the process of that spending bill effort in September. They will join as well. Also key, and don't forget about this, you have all 4 congressional leaders who signed off on this deal, and you have a president who has signed off as well. Now, there is concern that the president may waffle on this. We've seen this a number of times over the course of the last 2.5 years when it comes to these fights. But Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on the floor announcing his support for this deal, touting the defense increases, made very clear the president, in his words, supports the deal, and he is proud to join the president in supporting the deal. Trying to kind of box the president in on this one. The reality is they should have the votes, and leadership is confident they will be able to pass this. But given the fact of the increased spending, given the fact the restrictions on some of the Democratic policy priorities, it won't be overwhelming. It'll be just enough. John?
Just enough. Inspirational. Phil Mattingly, live on the Hill. Appreciate it. Good luck. Joining our conversation in studio, CNN's Caitlin Collins and Damian Paletta from the Washington Post. Damian, let me start with you from a structural budget standpoint, economic standpoint. What are the most significant elements of the deal?
Well, obviously, suspending the debt ceiling for 2 years kind of takes away that crisis element we might be facing as soon as September. So that is a big deal for the economy and for the White House and for both parties. But what it does do is it locks in trillion-dollar deficits as far as the eye can see. We're on pace to spend $4.4 trillion this year, bring in $3.4 trillion in revenue. That's a $1 trillion gap, and that's only going to get worse. And by agreeing to more spending in the next 2 years, they're kind of all accepting that that's going to be the status quo going forward, which is a big change from what Republicans had advocated for during the Obama administration.
Right. I want to come back to that in just a second, but to Phil's point about the president. The president's tweet says it's a compromise. It doesn't say yay. It doesn't say Republicans vote for it. We know his acting chief of staff, former budget director, some of the Freedom Caucus guys in Congress don't like this. Is there any chance the president will see negative reaction and back away?
Maybe. And a tweet is not a signature. We've come really close to the president. It's almost not signing a spending bill before, only to have even at one point the defense secretary, when it was James Mattis, had to come to the president and say, you need to sign this bill because we need the military to be funded. And that was the only reason the president signed it. So just because he tweets that does not give any confidence to people inside the White House that it's for sure going to happen. Now, it helps a little bit. Another thing that helps is also that a lot of people are distracted by the fact that Robert Mueller is testifying tomorrow, which multiple people have said behind the scenes that could help push this bill that typically may not make it over the edge. Because, of course, there are people in the White House who do not like this. You saw Mick Mulvaney's deputy, who is now running the Office of Management and Budget on TV today, singing this bill's praises, even though behind the scenes he was not on board with this. So keep an eye out for some of those members of the House Freedom Caucus to come to the president to express their displeasure, and that could shape it. But right now they're counting on the fact, and by they I mean the Democrats and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and some of the Republicans who are on board with this, for the president to be distracted by everything else that's going on.
Mnuchin's on the Senate side today talking to Republican senators at their policy luncheon. I think the issue is more on the House side. Speaker Pelosi just said moments ago she hopes the president keeps his promise to put his shoulder into the deal, if you will, and move it forward. I want to come back to the point Damian made, because where are we? We have divided government now. The Democrats control the House. So it's somewhat understandable that a Republican president or a Republican Senate would have to give something to the Democrats, because that's how compromise works. But let's look at federal discretionary spending. You look at the Obama years. Early on, remember the recession in the Obama years. Then spending came down a little bit. Republicans took control of the House. The sequester kicked in. Spending came down a little bit. You see it coming. And then with a Republican president, especially those first 2 years, Republicans ran everything. Spending went up. And now those last 3 years are projected. There'll be adjustments there for inflation and cost of growth. But this is not Donald Trump in the campaign in 2016. Said balancing the budget would be easy, eliminating the debt. He said the whole national debt. Actually, let's just listen to the president. The whole national debt, the entire national debt. Bye. Oh, I'm sorry. That's it. Let me bring that up here. He said we're going to get rid of $19 trillion in debt. How long would that take? I think you'd do it fairly quickly because of the fact of the numbers. What's fairly quickly? A period of 8 years. So the president said in 8 years he would get rid of the national debt. We showed you discretionary spending. Damian mentioned, look at the federal budget deficits here. You put this up. Remember, again, they were spiking at the beginning of the Obama years. We were in a recession then. Then you see, and again, a lot of that is because of the Republicans taking over in the House. You see them coming down, forcing the president into the sequester. And then in a Republican president, there go deficits through the sky again. And is the Tea Party dead? Is fiscal conservatism dead?
I think this is just another example of Trump remaking the party in his own image, right? I mean, the Tea Party wave in 2010, they came to Congress on the idea of fiscal responsibility when Obama was in office. And keep in mind, he did have a recession and an economic downturn that he's dealing with. But so few Republicans are willing to directly criticize the president. Even some of these fiscal hawks who are raising concerns with this budget deal, they're shifting the blame on Pelosi. And the only criticism you see of the president on these issues are from people who are no longer in Congress, like Mark Sanford, a former Freedom Caucus member, who's trying to potentially run against Trump on this issue in 2020.
But I don't think there was anybody that really in their heart of hearts believed that Donald Trump was a true fiscal conservative when he ran. I mean, there was deep concern among the real fiscal hawks that he was not going to really carry their banner when and if he became president. And to go back to Caitlin's point, the important constituency here is not necessarily the people in Congress who are whispering in the president's ear, or even the people in the White House. It's the people on the screen. It's can the Freedom Caucus types who are the fiscal conservatives, can they get into the ear of Lou Dobbs? Can they get into the ear of Sean Hannity and whip up a kind of opposition to this that plays out across the screen of Fox News And if the president sees that, what we've seen in the past again and again is that if he sees that and it gets him riled up, whatever he's tweeted, whatever support he's offered in phone calls to Mitch McConnell doesn't mean a whole lot.
Remember the House Republican health care plan that was awesome until it was mean.
Until it was mean.
Until it was mean. But to your point, that's where the Mueller point, that's where your Mueller point could come into play. It's hard to get their attention.
Exactly. Right now,
but it still could get their attention Thursday and Friday. I mean, we still have a few more days.
That's a long way away. Congress yet. But right now, that's not their focus. And in the days after, we're not sure it's going to be their focus. But speaking to the president being a fiscal conservative or not, behind the scenes, they've told him, look at these numbers, look what the projections are going to be. He doesn't really care when he's out of office. He's made that point to several people behind the scenes.
Right, you've had reporting in recent days that he says if he gets reelected, then he'll start cutting spending. Well, we'll see who runs the Congress, and we'll see if that holds up. It certainly hasn't in the first term. Up next for us, Joe Biden has a new plan out today aimed at reversing many of the same policies he helped make law. Joe Joe Biden unveiling a detailed criminal justice plan today, hoping a new approach helps him deflect sharp criticism of his past. That's not likely, with debates looming next week. Biden's new plan, though, walks away from many of the approaches he championed a generation ago in helping to pass the 1994 crime bill. The mandatory minimum sentences in that package, for example, now blamed for a rise in mass incarceration. Biden's hope, when rivals criticize his past, he can steer the conversation to the future.
No mandatory minimums, the end of private prison, additional funding for drug courts, bail reform, no juveniles at all in adult prisons, mandatory treatment, not jail for those with drug addiction, decriminalizing marijuana, automatically expunging records for marijuana conviction, job training and education while you're in prison. I believe my criminal justice reform package is as strong or stronger than anyone else's.
Now, can he sell it in a way that doesn't make people forget? No one's going to forget the 1990s and the crime bill that are so important in Democratic politics right now. But to get it, okay, he gets it now. He's with us.
That's the big question. He's going to be challenged on this almost immediately during these debates. You already see Senator Cory Booker coming out with tweets saying, don't show us what you want to do. Talk about what you've done over the past 40 years. And so his record over 40 years, his record on the crime bill is going to be challenged, and he's going to face a lot of scrutiny from other Democrats within his party and also from Republicans who are using this to sort of try to pull off some of the African-American vote, saying, President Trump passed the First Step Act. You compare that to maybe Senator Kamala Harris, who was a prosecutor. Compare that to Joe Biden, who helped pass the 1994 crime bill. So he's going to be facing challenges from both his left and his right, and it'll be very difficult for him to defend himself. But we'll see next week whether or not he's able.
And he'll be center stage. Wednesday is Biden's night, with Booker on one side, Harris on the other. He went at it on some of these issues with Harris last time, more of a race and segregation and busing issues. Now we'll see if crime comes up. But to your point about Senator Booker, who has not been on television interviews sometimes in Biden's face. We'll see if it plays out on the debate stage. It's a different dynamic. Some candidates show up and some don't. But here's the tweet, and his campaign says he's referencing Biden here. It's not enough to tell us what you're going to do for our communities. Show us what you've done for the last 40 years. You created this system. We'll dismantle it. So no forgiveness there. Biden's point is, and I was here at the time, Biden's point is that was what mayors were demanding. That is what a lot of community groups were demanding. The country had a crack epidemic. And Biden's point is Washington did what we were asked at the time. 25 years later, yes, you can look back at it and say we overshot on a number of areas.
Right. And one thing Biden does need to do more effectively is not just explaining his past, but showing what he's going to do in the future. That's something he hasn't done well, whether it was talking about the Anita Hill hearings or his positions on the Hyde Amendment. He's sort of gone back and forth. But the matchup I am looking for is with Booker and Biden. I know there's a lot of talk about Kamala Harris and Biden, but I think Booker is going to come with guns a-blazing. He didn't get a chance to take him on in the last debates, but he will this time. And I think Kamala Harris has given a green light to the other candidates to go after Biden on issues like this one.
But that's what plays such a factor in this. It's not just these issues. It's that they see that she successfully went after him, and it really shot her up nationally. And so they saw that it worked to go on offense against the person who is seen as the front runner. The question is if other candidates start to do that, or if they try to wait and let someone else try to take the more moderate candidate down, and then they try to take that space. But that's certainly going to be something you're going to see people try to capitalize on, is that Kamala Harris, Joe Biden moment.
And we're going to see he did not have a good first round. And his whole calling card is I'm the guy you want up against Trump. He has to prove in this debate, or else he's going to keep coming down, that he can be a more active, engaging with his rival. So we'll see. He's planted a flag on health care this week. Now he's planting the flag on criminal justice reform. To Booker's point, Booker's essentially saying, you did this in the past. I'm not going to forgive you. That's a dangerous place to be in politics. Every politician makes mistakes. Every politician has times change, things change. But Senator Harris today is introducing, with Chairman Nadler on the House side, a new bill to decriminalize marijuana. Remove marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act, resentence and expunge past and pending convictions, prohibits the denial of federal public benefits based on marijuana use, a whole number of issues there. This, for her, is a flip. When she was a prosecutor in San Francisco, she had a much different view. She opposed a California ballot initiative to make more lenient marijuana laws. So a lot of politicians change.
They do, and one of the things that appeals to voters when candidates go after their support is not just to sort of focus on the substantive issue, whatever it is, in this case, crime, but to call into question the person's judgment, right? I mean, that's ultimately what Cory Booker is saying about Biden is, whatever the context of the situation, you you applied a set of judgment and a set of decisions to a problem and came out on the wrong side. And I would have better judgment. And oftentimes candidates with less of a kind of record are able to kind of skate across that because they don't have the kind of decades-long record that people can examine. Now, like with Kamala Harris, she does have a record in California that people can look at and compare what she did. But nobody's record is as long as Joe Biden's, and he's going to be put in this position not only in the substance of it, but ultimately on the question of, this was your judgment. This was Joe Biden's best judgment at the time was that this was the direction to go, and we all look back now and say that was wrong.
Be interesting to see if Nimble. You have,
just really quickly, one thing that the Biden camp says is, don't forget that Joe Biden was the vice president to Obama for 8 years. Right. Don't erase that part of my record. Right. That also includes some criminal justice reform issues as well.
Right. We'll see if he's more nimble in defending his past, getting to Obama, and looking to the future. Mm-hmm. That was what's missing, the nimble on the debate stage. But maybe it's a little rusty. We'll see next week. Up next, relief for the Bernie Sanders campaign after a big internal dispute over money.
Talib. Honestly, I believe they hate our country, okay? I believe they hate our country. Cortez, I said, I'm not going 3 names. These 4 people, the squad. No. By calling them out, because we don't like when they talk about evil Jews.
That's the president last hour, a summit of teenagers here in Washington. The members of the squad did not use the term, Ilhan Omar, did not use the term evil Jews. She talked about evil actions by the Israeli government. But the president has decided, a week ago Sunday, a racist tweet escalated this fight with the squad. He clearly thinks he's going to keep going.
Yeah, you rarely see an issue with this president that he holds on to for more than a week because he's so impulsive and he bounces from issue to issue. But he's grabbed onto this issue. He saw that his tweet, which, his past tweets haven't been getting as much traction. He even said it at a social media summit a couple of weeks ago. He saw that this tweet last Sunday did get a lot of traction and did allow him to dominate the news cycle. So that's part of the reason he's really leaning into this, spending as much time at these various rallies and rally-like events, talking about the squad, even though they're just 4 freshman members of Congress with limited amounts of power. The president sees them as a foil, and the fact that he's still talking about them a week plus after the initial tweet shows that he's going to continue to dig in on this.
And he's making the political strategy here plainly obvious, as he just did in that speech, pointing out that Ilhan Omar is from Minnesota, a state that he lost by about 45,000 points in 2016, a state he's told people he wants to win in 2020. And of course, Rashida Tlaib is from Michigan. So the president is making it obvious. He's going to go after this as a political strategy because he thinks he can tap into the fact that maybe they're not as popular outside of the cities or the districts that they're from. And that is something he wants to be able to capitalize on in the upcoming election.
It'd be interesting if he would debate them on policy. In that session, we didn't play this part of it.
Which is what advisors tell him to focus on.
Suggested that Tlaib was not sane. I don't think that's a policy fight, just saying. Up next, keeping count of the president's latest false statements. Welcome back. Some important news just in off Capitol Hill. The Senate voting 90-8 to confirm Mark Esper as the new defense secretary, new chief of the Pentagon. That news just in. Now moving on to a very important number, 61. Keep that number in mind, 61. That's how many false claims President Trump made last week through Sunday. 22 at a campaign rally in North Carolina, 15 in a meeting with his cabinet, 6 on Twitter, and 5 while speaking to reporters on the White House grounds. Here's just a small sample.
Why would Honduras or Guatemala or El Salvador, why would they keep their criminals when you can put them into the caravan, lose them in a caravan, and send them up to the United States? Unemployment among Hispanic Americans, where we're doing really well. You know why? Because they want a strong border. They want it because they understand the border better than anybody. They want that strong border. They want that wall.
CNN's Daniel Dale and his team compiled all those false claims, as he has throughout the Trump presidency. Daniel is with me now. Let's go through some of these. You rank them in this piece you write on CNN.com. I urge everybody to read the full piece. It gives you a much better perspective of the problem. Let's call it a problem. Most egregious claim last week, the president talking about Congresswoman Ilhan Omar.
She said, you can hold your chest out. You can, when I think of America, when I think of Al-Qaeda, I can hold my chest out. They can't call our country and our people garbage. They can't be anti-Semitic. They can't talk about evil Jews, which is what they say, evil Jews.
Why do you rank that as most egregious?
Well, the president was making false claims to baselessly smear members of Congress as people who call Jews evil, which Ilhan Omar never did, and someone who sympathized or even praised a terrorist group, which she never did. And so there are some false claims Trump makes that are little exaggerations that really don't hurt anyone except for the truth. But in this case, he was essentially slandering a fellow elected official.
He certainly was. Embellishment of the week, you talk about Hafiz Mohammed Saeed, the president tweeting this on July 17th last week. After a 10-year search, the so-called mastermind of the Mumbai terror attacks has been arrested in Pakistan. Great pressure has been exerted over the past 2 years to find him. Why is that an embellishment?
So this was Trump playing, the conquering commander-in-chief. This was his bin Laden moment. We found the terrorist. This was funny to Pakistanis because Saeed has been living openly in Pakistan for years. He's been repeatedly arrested and released. He founded a political party. He gives interviews, sermons, press conferences. So there was no bin Laden-style hunt for this man who was living quite happily in Pakistan.
All right. Well, we'll call that an embellishment. Another big issue is the president. First, he signaled these dramatic ICE raids were going to begin. They were supposed to happen on Sunday. Then last week, the president said they happened and they were hugely successful.
The ICE raids were very successful. I spoke to the head of ICE. I spoke to a couple of people. We had many people. It was a very successful day.
Very successful. ICE says 35 people have been arrested in an operation that was to target, I think, about 2,000.
That's right, John. So I don't fact-check claims like very successful because that's pretty subjective, but I think it's important to provide the context about what happened here. This was framed as a massive operation. A few dozen people got arrested.
35. Very successful. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, John.
It's important work. Up next for us, a new British Prime Minister taking the helm, and he's interesting.